they had a concept called a power nap. Let's find out if power naps work. Some people say they work. Okay, here we go. Okay, girls, does anybody want to make any comments on what we said before? We're good? I mean, nobody has anything to say? I basically told you, we read the Pasha inside, we read the Chumash, and I told you what the Mefarshim say, what the Rashi and the other Mefarshim say in our Pasha, and much more so in Parshas Chukas. Because twice in Parshas Chukas, the Be'er comes up. The first time the Be'er comes up in the beginning of the Pasha when Miriam passes away. And then later on in the Pasha, the Be'er comes up a second time when they had the Maisa with Nachal Arnoin, the miracle that I described before, where the Amoriim went into the caves and the water of the Be'er kept on coming out till it filled the entire valley with water and washed them out and so on. And then the Jews sang Shira. You know, the Jewish people sang Shira 10 times. In the Chumash, you have 4 Shirim. In the Chumash, you have 4 Shirim. The men sang Az Yashir, that's number 1. The women sang Vatan Lohem Miri Ashira Vladeshem. The song of the women is considered the second song. The third song is called Shir HaBe'er, the song of the well of the Be'er, which the Jewish people sang after the story of Nachal Arnoin. There's a very weird little detail about that story. Hashem's name isn't mentioned. Oz Yoshid Yisrael Es Hashiras Leis Shir Azais Ali Be'er Enu Law Be'er Chafaru Asarim Karu and Divi B'Mishanis, whatever. Matanim and Achalden Chalil Bombeis Bombeis Hagai Shebes Tei Moyav Ashel something Pe'er V'Nishkaf Apnei HaYishimin. Hashem's name isn't mentioned and Moshe's name isn't mentioned. So the Chazal say, Rashi says, how could the Yidden sing a song to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and not mention HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name? And the answer is because they couldn't mention Moshe Rabbeinu's name. Why could they not mention Moshe Rabbeinu's name? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was punished because of the well. Moshe Rabbeinu lost the right, to go into Eretz Yisrael because he hit the rock rather than speak to the rock. And since Moshe Rabbeinu lost his right to go into Eretz Yisrael by hitting to the rock rather than speaking to the rock, they didn't want to mention Moshe's name when they said the Shir HaBe'er because it would be an embarrassment to Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Yidden said, if they're not going to mention the Talmud, they're not going to mention the Rav. If they're not going to mention the name of Moshe Rabbeinu, they're not going to mention the name of Hashem. So you have a song of thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, neither Moshe Rabbeinu nor the Eibishter are mentioned. And then the 4th Shir in the Chumash is called Ha'azinu Hashamayim V'Adaveh. That's the 4th song. The Medrash says that historically the Jewish people have 10 songs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10. The 10th of those songs is going to be when Mashiach comes. And before Mashiach there are 9. And they're listed in Tanakh. You know, the 4 in the Chumash. Then you have the story of David o Barak. You have the Shir of David. You have the Shir of Yeshaya. That's already 7. And there's 2 more which I don't remember off the top of my head. The Medrash says the Jewish people have 10 songs. One of these 10 Shirim is the Shir HaBe'er, singing for the well, for the water that came from the rock. And of course the pasuk finishes V'nishkaf al pnei hayishimin, and Rashi explains that this rock would go up, that uphills, downhills, tumble. When the 40 years were over, it tumbled into the Yam Kinneret, into the Tiberias Sea, whatever they call it, and it's there ad hayom hazeh. Okay? So that's what we did, girls. We overviewed the inyan of the Be'er from the Psuk. Does anybody want to ask any questions or make any comments? And I mean it. I'm sincere about that. You seem to be afraid of me today. No one said a word. Okay. If no one has anything to say, I'm going to go on. I'm going to move. Okay? Number 1. Let's talk about my favorite subject. What's my favorite subject? Complaining and arguing. Right? I want you to know that these 2 words, complaints and arguments, is from Rashi and Chumash. You know the story of Ki'ish Echad B'Leiv Echad? Remember that story? Ki'ish Echad B'Leiv Echad? Somebody has to nod for that, yes? Somebody? Ki'ish Echad B'Leiv Echad? Rashi says, Ka'ol Shar HaChaniyas B'Tarumas of Machlekes. Every other time the Jewish people traveled, they complained and they argued. So that's where I took those words from. The words complain and argue go together when the Jews travel. Kol Shara Chanias, each time the Jews move from a place to a place, they complain and they argue. When they came to Har Sinai, they neither complained nor argued, and that's when the Eibush decided to give them the Torah. Okay? So first I want to tell you a sweet story. On Stam it's a Maaseh, which you're not likely to hear. I love telling stories. It's my favorite things, especially stories that I've heard from reliable sources that are likely not to be told too often. There's a Jew in Argentina whose name is Rabbi Grumblat, Tzvi Grumblat. He is a general in the Rebbe's army. He's not a soldier, he's a general. He's the head shliach to Argentina, and he's a man of incredible accomplishment. Mamish, amazing. He's a yid of total Mesiras Nefesh. He's a yid of total self-sacrifice, total Mesiras Nefesh. Hold on a second. Okay. He's a very, very Chassidish yid, Tzvi Grumblat. How did he become the Rebbe's head shliach to Argentina? It's a simple story. He was not from a Lubavitcher family. He was from a Frum family, but not from a Lubavitcher family. How did they end up in Lubavitch? There was a shliach in Argentina named Rabbi Baumgarten, Berel Baumgarten, Harav Berel Baumgarten, Doiv Baumgarten, who was a Yid Tzaddik, a very Chassidish Yid, a Yid of Mesiras Nefesh. The Rebbe sent him on shlichus to Argentina, and he was really very special. I mean, anybody who knew him says this man was holy. Berel Baumgarten died in March of 1978 suddenly. He was a young man. He just died. I don't know if he was 60. He was a young man when he passed away. He was quite young. Maybe not even been 50, I don't know. Berel Baumgarten passed away. Tzvi Grumblat was a Bocher in 770. Was a very Chassidish Bocher. His whole life was Rebbe, Maimorim, Siches, Chassidus. He has a good head. He learned in Daven. And as soon as Rabbi Baumgarten died, the Rebbe called him, sent him a message. Lech lecha, me'artzecha, me'meladetecha, basically pick yourself up, go back to Argentina and take over Rabbi Baumgarten's job. That's exactly what happened. So he told the Rebbe, but I'm not married. So the Rebbe told him, so you get married. Anyway, he found his wife within weeks. Mamish. He found his kala within weeks. One of the miracles was he found his wife right away. He wasn't even thinking of getting married, and he moved to Argentina. This happened in 1978. That's 42 years ago. And Argentina is an amazing... I was in Buenos Aires. In the city of Buenos Aires, the city, I think there's 23 Chabad houses. The city of Buenos Aires. A city, not a state, not a country. A city. You had 2 Chabad houses in one city. In Brooklyn, they'd be killing each other. In one city, it's incredibly successful. He's a very special Jew, really. So he told me a Maaseh that happened with the Rebbe and Rabbi Baumgarten, his boss. He was his boss, his predecessor. Berel Baumgarten was a very big Mekush. He was very close to the Rebbe. He loved the Rebbe very, very much. And he lived in New York, and he would travel all over the world for the Rebbe. He was one of those roving rabbis. He traveled all over the world on behalf of the Rebbe. And then in 1963, the Rebbe said, okay, no more traveling. Move to Argentina and stay. So he moved to Argentina. He opened up an outpost of Chabad, and he was there for about 15 years until his passing. And he was very poor. He was pashut broke. He was unbelievably poor. How poor was he? That he could not afford to buy meat or chicken. He would buy bones. Bones, and he would cook it. That's what he ate. He was incredibly poor. Very, very poor. Anyway, he was by the Rebbe in New York. He came to visit. And I don't know if you know Hasidim. There's different styles of Hasidim. Some Hasidim never complain to the Rebbe. And some Hasidim complain about everything. Berel Baumgarten was one of those Jews. The rumor was he wrote to the Rebbe a letter every day. Every day. Every day he reported to the Rebbe what happened that day. Imagine. And if he missed a day, the Rebbe said, what happened to your letter? He wrote to the Rebbe every single day. By the way, if you write to the Rebbe every single day, you'll never do an Aveda in your life. He wrote to the Rebbe every day. Everything was going on in his life, the Rebbe knew. Anyway, he came to the Rebbe, and in his tetzel, he didn't want to stay. He wanted to come back. He wanted to be near the Rebbe. It wasn't like he minded being in Shlichus. The idea of being so far away from the Rebbe was very hard for him. And then he said to the Rebbe, I have no food. So he was in Yechidus, he was in the Rebbe's room. And in his note, he wrote how hard it is for him. And again, the way I understand it, he wrote that it's hard for him because he has no parnasa. But it's also hard for him that he's very alone and he's very far away, he wants to be near the Rebbe, and so on. The Rebbe read his note. I'm telling you the story as I heard it from his disciple, Rabbi Tzvi Grumblat Shlita. So Gesundheit. And the Rebbe was holding a pencil. The Rebbe used to use a pencil, not a pen. The Rebbe threw the pencil down on the table. Threw it down on the table. And he said in English, no more complaints. No more complaints. No more complaining. Du wirst zurückfahren. You're going to go back to Argentina. Und du wirst zurückfahren besimcha v'tuv levav. You're going to go back to Argentina happily. Und nicht, weil ich heiß dir zurückfahren besimcha v'tuv levav, nor weil du fährst zurück besimcha v'tuv levav. Which means, the Rebbe said, you're going to go back. And you're going to go back happy. And you're not going to go back happy because I'm telling you to go back and I'm telling you to go back happy, but because you're going to go back happy. And that was it. No more, stop complaining, stop fetching. This is your shlichus. Go back to Argentina. This is your place. Shoin. This is the story. The next morning, Rabbi Chadakov called him. And Rabbi Chadakov told him that there's going to be a regular stipend. Every month, they're going to send him money. In other words, in Yechidus, the Rebbe didn't talk about the finances. And the Yechidus, the Rebbe talked about, take a wild guess. Anybody? What are you supposed to say when you don't know what to say? Arguing and complaining. Arguing and complaining. He must have bothered the Rebbe a lot. He didn't want to be in Argentina, he wanted to be with the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said to him, no more complaints. Du wirst zurückfahren, besimcha v'tuv levav, und nicht, weil ich heiß dir zurückfahren, besimcha v'tuv levav, nor weil du fährst zurück, besimcha v'tuv levav. You're going to go back joyously and happily, because that's what you're doing. And then the next day, the financials, Rabbi Chadakov, they sent him, the Rebbe sent him money every chodesh. He didn't know how to raise money. I mean, people, you go on shlichus to raise money to support yourself. He had a hard time with that. The Rebbe used to send him money every chodesh. His own blood, Egen Eitzah. He should have his own parnasa to keep his neshama and guf together. This is a story about complaints. Now, since I told you one story about a complaint, the story is going to complain that the story is lonely. Stories get lonely also, no? So I'll tell you a second story so that the first story shouldn't be lonely. What's the second story? Girls, this is a true story. My father heard it from him, I think. He was on shlichus in Argentina. This is the early 1960s. And the Rebbe told him to visit, I guess it's called northern Brazil. I'm assuming it's northern Brazil. Yeah, Argentina is above Brazil, yeah? Anybody from South America? Natalie, you from South America?
Yes, Panama.
So I would say you're Panama, you're Central America. Argentina's above Brazil, right?
Yeah.
So the Rebbe told him he should visit northern Brazil.
Because I think it's in the south of Brazil.
Argentina is south of Brazil. Okay, you know better. So then he had to visit south of Brazil. Wherever Argentina and Brazil meet. To go from the country from Argentina to Brazil, you had to go by ferry. There was no road. So you had to go by boat, by ferry. Now, he had been very lonely. He loved the Rebbe. He wanted to be in 770 very much. And he had written the Rebbe a letter asking the Rebbe that in the Farbrengen of Yud Beis Tammuz, the Rebbe should think about him. The Rebbe made a Farbrengen Yud Beis Tammuz. And he wrote the Rebbe a letter asking that the Farbrengen of Yud Beis Tammuz, the Rebbe should think about him. The Rebbe should think about him. Sure. He goes on this. He got a message from the Rebbe to go to Brazil from Argentina. So he was on this ferry with his car. He was sitting in the car, and the ferry hit a boat. And his car rolled off the ferry into the water. This car rolled off the ferry into the water. Now, it's near a falls. In northern Brazil, there's apparently kind of a falls. Northern Argentina, kind of a falls. Like a waterfall. It's a very dangerous place. And people who go down in that water, nobody comes up alive. He didn't know how to swim. A kid said, his car sinks to the bottom. And a hand opens the door. And he comes out of this car and he floats to the surface. He didn't know how to swim. And he stayed alive. This story happened during the Farbrengen. In the middle of the Farbrengen of Yud Thomas, the Rebbe suddenly turns. He had a brother who lived in Crown Heights, whose name was Harav Mendel Baumgarten. The Rebbe turns to his brother and says, Mendel Baumgarten, say l'chaim for your brother Bettel. So Mendel Baumgarten said l'chaim for his brother Bettel. Anyway, the next time Bettel Baumgarten came to New York, he told the Rebbe the story that his car went off the boat and a hand opened the door and he didn't know how to swim. He floated to the surface and he stayed alive. So the Rebbe says, "Nu, did I think about you by the Farbrengen?" I said, "Did I think about you by the Farbrengen?" This is the story. So now the two stories of Baruch Hashem are not lonely. Let's go back to the complaints and the arguments. Kinderlach girls, you have to understand. Every story in the Torah is a historic event. It happened. But every story in the Torah is Torah. Torah means, like I explained to you in my introduction today, it tells the story of the world through God's eyes, what the Eibishter wants from the world. The Kavanas, I mean, the reason for the world. And it's also Torah Lashon Hara. I forgot to mention this before. Every thought in Torah is a lesson in Avodas Hashem. Torah's Milasha teaches lessons in Avodas Hashem. And one of the stories that dominates the Chumash is travels, right? Avraham is traveling, Yankov is traveling, the Yidna traveling. The whole Chumash is full of travels, moving from place to place to place, 42 journeys, right? So the Rebbe says in a Sikha, why are the travels of the Jews so dominant in the story of the Chumash? Why does Torah waste so much time telling us of the travels? In Parshas Maseh, there's an entire section that simply enumerates all the places that the Jewish people stopped and started. So the Rebbe answers, because every journey was also spiritual. Every time Jews went from a place to a place, they had to grow. Now here's the problem, girls. I tell this to you always. The Eibishter has a higher opinion, a higher expectation of us than we'll ever have. So if Hashem gives you a job, and you say to yourself, okay, I need 2 weeks to do it, Hashem gives you 72 hours. Hashem gives you a job, and you think you need a day, the Eibishter gives you 6 hours. Why? The Eibishter expects so much from us. And if you remember what I always tell you, the underlying issue is faith. That you should believe. Trust Him. So every time Jews move, they don't feel ready. Every single time the Yidden move from point A to point B to C, D, E, F, G until 42 journeys, every time they move, they feel like it's too soon. Hashem is moving them very, very fast. Like I explained to you weeks ago, they were supposed to go into Israel in a few days. But the amount of mamunah necessary to make that trip would have been absolutely impossible to fathom. The amount of faith Yidden would have needed to travel into Eretz Yisrael in a matter of a few days would have been so much, and they just didn't have enough amunah. They didn't have enough trust. So here, every time the Jewish people move, the Eibishter is moving them faster than they would like to move. Why? What happens when Jews come to a place? What happens when Jews come to a place? Number one, they complain. What's the complaint? We didn't finish our previous job. You moved too soon. We didn't finish the shlichus that we had for the first job. Why are you moving us? And number two, they argued. Who do they complain to? They complain to Moshe Rabbeinu. Who do they complain to? They complain to the Eibishter. And what was the complaint? To the Beinei Shaleilim, you gave me a task. To work on myself, to work on the Torah, to work on the world. And I didn't finish it. Why are you moving me to the next location? Why are you moving me to the next shlichus? Why are you moving me to the next step? And of course the Eibishter's answer is, I gave you enough time. And the Yidden say, no, you didn't. That's a complaint to the Eibishter. And then there's an argument. What's the argument? Huh? The Jews move from point A to point B. So Reuven turns to Shimon and says, what do you think the message is, huh? What's the message? What's God trying to say? What is the meaning of this trip? So Reuven says, the meaning of this trip is that from now on we should all look at each other with a good eye. And Shimon says, no. It's not about the eyes. Hashem wants to look at each other with good ears. And Levi says Hashem wants us to use the right nostril rather than the left nostril, whatever that means. So the Jews argue. That's the meaning of complaints and arguments. I wasn't joking. I wasn't being sarcastic. It's a Rashi in Chumash. Kol ha'chaniyes batarumas ha'machlekes. Every time the Jews travel, they complain to their superiors and they argue with their contemporaries. They complain to Hashem, Rebbeinu Shalom, we're not ready. And the Eibusha says it's time. And the Yidden say we're not ready. And the Eibusha says it's time. So they move, they listen. The cloud goes up, you got to follow. But then they argue, what does it mean? So the Jewish people were in a place called Midbar Sin, right? And a place called Midbar Sin. And they moved from Midbar Sin to a place called Refidim. Correct? Is that what the Chumash says? And they argue, they complain and they argue. They complain to Hashem that they're not ready to move. And they argue with one another, what is the meaning of the move? Does anybody have any questions or comments? Are you guys there today? I feel like no one's here. You guys here? You in?
We're here.
Okay. Okay, so when I was telling you before about complaints and arguments, I wasn't joking. It's a Rashi. I didn't make it up. Now, let's talk about the place. They left Midbar Sin. And by the way, for those who care and don't care, does anybody know what's the Hebrew word for China?
Sin.
That's right. They moved from Midbar Sin, the Midbar of China. That is a joke, okay? Midbar Sin, the Midbar of China. Right in the middle of the Mediterranean. Near the coast of the Mediterranean. Now, they came to the Refidim. The Refidim is a place that lives in infamy. We know about the Refidim. Amalek started up with Yidden and the Refidim. That's the next story, which we're going to do in Tafshin Pei Aleph next school year. On the word Refidim, Rashi brings from the Chazal, from the Mechilta, I think, that the translation of the word, the Refidim was a place with a name, and the name has a taich. The meaning of the place, Refidim, is, quote, Rafu Yedeihem Midivrei Torah. Rafu Yedeihem Midivrei Torah means their hands were weak from words of Torah. Rafu Yedeihem Midivrei Torah. Their hands were weak from words of Torah. When Yidden came to the Refidim, they experienced what they call in Sifrei Musar, a rifyain. They became weak. They became deficient in their devoutness to Hashem. They left Egypt, I don't know, how much before? 40 days before? Something like that. Couldn't have been too much longer, right? 35 days before, somewhere between 30 and 45 days they left Mitzrayim. And they were so excited to leave Mitzrayim, they were counting the minutes until they're going to get to Torah. They haven't yet arrived at Midbar Sinai. Midbar Sinai is the next stop. After the Refidim is Sinai. They, pardon me. They come to this place, the Refidim, and they become weak. Their hands become weak to words of Torah. Which means that even during those 50 days or 52 days that they were counting the Omer, counting the Sfira, from the time they left Mitzrayim till they got the actual Torah from the Eibush, that they went through a rifyain. They experienced a weakness, a weakening. So Chassidus asks a question. And the question Chassidus asks is that the Refidim is a nutrikon, is a Rashi Tevis Rafu Yudeim. Their hands became weak. And the Shaila and the Kasha is, Torah you don't learn with your hands. Torah you learn with your brain. So why is Refidim Rafu Yedeihem Midivrei Torah? It should be Rafu Rosheihem Midivrei Torah. Rafu Sichleihem Midivrei Torah. Torah you learn. So why is the Chazal say that the meaning of the word Refidim is Rafu Yedeihem, their hands became weak for Divrei Torah? What do hands have to do with Torah? This is the kasha. And Chassidus answers the question. It's a very important question, very important answer. And the answer to the question is as follows. Anybody who thinks Torah is a book of knowledge does not know what he or she is talking about. Full stop. Torah is not a book of ideas. It's not a book of philosophy. It's not a book of science. It's not a book of halachic theory. Torah is not an intellectual book. It's an intellectual book also. Torah is a book of life. Torah is a book of life. Torah is a book of life. It teaches how to live. Part of life is how to think. Part of life is how to feel. And part of life is how to do. And when a person learns Torah and his brain is full, but in his mind, the Torah is a book of ideas that doesn't translate into action, that's the Taichirafu Yedeihem Divrei Torah. They considered learning. Great book, a lot of intellect, a lot of scholarship. They were smart people. They loved to study. But they lost touch. They lost sense of the point. Limud Hameiv L'Dei Maisa. When a person studies Torah and the ideas remain in his head, he's not learning Torah. Because Torah is not intellectual. Torah is life. Intellect's a part of life. And that's what the Remez is. They came to defeat him. They continue studying Torah with the same enthusiasm, the same passion, the same alacrity they studied before. But their hands, the idea that Torah is something which is supposed to affect their lives practically, there was a weakening. And that's the Remez of Refidim. They came to a place where they continued to learn, but they experienced a setback, they experienced a diminution in the idea of Lilmaid, Ulalamed, Lishmaid, Velasei, Sulakayim. The reason to study Torah is to act. And when you learn Torah and it doesn't translate into action, that's called a very serious rifyun. And that's the remez of the word refidim. That the Rafu Yedeya Medivrei Torah. They continued learning the Torah, but the Torah stopped affecting their hands, their life. As the Rebbe always says, Torah is called Torah's emes, it's a Torah of truth. And Torah is called Torah's chayim, a Torah of life. It's a hirabah chayim, it's a lesson in life. And it's a terrible mistake to look at the Torah as a book of ideas. It's a book of ideas also, but it's a book of life. Okay? So girls, we just did two things. In the last 30 minutes, we did two things. Number one, I finally explained to you the meaning of the word complaining and arguing. And number two, I translated the word refidim for you. Does anybody want to make a comment at this point?
I have a question. What's like the lesson for us, like practically about like Eden complaining, like in the all the journey in the desert? Because it seems like negative. Like what can we learn from it?
Well, the complaining is negative. Arguing is negative. But why they were complaining and what they were arguing about is not negative. And I'll tell you how, Natalie. We're very nice to ourselves. We all move very slowly through life. And we all don't want to rush. Right? Don't bother me. I'm taking my time. The Eibishter pushes us. It says in Pirkei Avos. Hazman kotzer, the time is short. V'hamalach meruba, the work is much. V'apayel matzelim, the workers are lazy. U'balabai is deichik, and the boss is pushing. That's life. Life is Hazman kotzer, hamalacha meruba, payel matzelim, balabai is deichik. That means we all want to take our time, and the Eibishter says, move it. Now in the desert, the Eibishter said, move it in such a way that they had no choice but to move. So they complained and they argued. The Eibishter is telling us, move it, and we say, we don't hear him. We don't hear. We don't complain, we don't argue. Why? Because we're not bothered. So we don't have to complain. We don't have to argue. But the message of moving, the Rebbe always used to say to people, whatever you did was not enough. You know, the Rebbe gave you a job, the next morning you wanted to know if it was finished. Either job takes 2 years to complete, the next day, you finished? The Rebbe was constantly pushing. And I'm sure there's a Das Elyon to this pushing, but the Das Tachner, Rabbi Krinsky said once, if the Rebbe didn't push us as much as he did, we wouldn't have accomplished half of what we accomplished. The Rebbe had such unreasonable expectations of Chassidim. The Rebbe wanted Chassidim to deliver so much so quickly, and they were not capable. And the Rebbe wouldn't hear it. There's a Jew in Israel. I read a book about a Yid who lived in Israel. He was a shliach of the Rebbe. He was one of the Balkechs of the Rebbe in Israel. His name was Leizer Karasik, Rabbi Karasik. He was a big chassid. He was a very big chassid. And he was also a big Talmud Chacham. He was a very learned man. He learned Talmud from Lubavitch. Leizer Karasik used to get letters from the Rebbe once or twice a week. Scathing letters. The Rebbe was so upset about everything. This is wrong, and this is wrong, and this he didn't do, and this he didn't do enough. He was the Rebbe's representative in Israel. So all the Rebbe's complaints about everything in Israel, about the yeshiva, and about the Beis Rivka, and about a Tzach, and about Aguch, and about Beis Medrash, what was it called, Beit Sefer L'Mlacha, any organization in Israel, that's just all he had to talk, he got the complaints. And the Rebbe's complaints were so severe. Most of those letters are not printed. I've seen a few. And man, the Rebbe once wrote to Avram Parish that you're making me into a Jew who always sounds angry. The Rebbe used to write such critical letters very often, not once a year, once a week. And Leizer Karasik is getting these letters. He's talking now 1953, 1954. What was Lubavitch in 1954? What was Israel in 1954? It was it was a baby country. Most of the Lubavitch Chassidim had just come from Russia. They didn't have houses, they didn't have jobs, they didn't have any money, they didn't have any skills. And the Rebbe is telling them, bring Mashiach, yesterday. So Rabbi Karasik would get these really, really critical letters from the Rebbe, and he would feel very bad. Because first of all, he felt personally criticized, but more importantly, the Rebbe was criticizing everybody. So he would sit down at his typewriter, and he would write a letter of defense for our nation, Israel. And he would say to the Rebbe that the Rebbe is expecting too much. The Hasidim can't do it. They're not established yet. They're not experienced yet. They have no skills yet, and so on and so forth. A whole night he would write a letter. And in the morning he would look at the letter and say, nah. He would tear it up and throw it in the garbage. 4 days later, he got another letter from the Rebbe, also pushing and criticizing and complaining. So Leizer would sit down at his typewriter, write a whole night, write a letter to the Rebbe defending Hasidim and explaining. In the morning, he'd look at the letter. He never sent it once. He never sent it to the Rebbe. He wrote the letters, never sent them. The Rebbe got them, by the way, but he never sent them. You get the point. The Eibishter pushes. So you're asking me, what's the lesson from the complaining and the arguing? We're not complaining and we're not arguing because we don't feel the kick in the pants, but we should. It's a very important lesson. Everybody should feel an urgency. Right? If Mashiach doesn't come today and comes tomorrow, what's going to happen? To the Rebbe, that's terrible. To me and you, not so bad. And that's the Tarumas HaMachlekes. The Tarumas HaMachlekes are a reaction to Hashem not giving Yidden room to move. Move, gicher, move. And there's a lesson for this. I mean, I'm talking to you to make myself feel terrible. But you understand? That's the Hirah B'chaim from this. You're clear, you understand? And any other questions?
How can we be conscious about that pushing?
I know how I feel that. I don't know if I do it. I just remember the last Fabrengen I was at. The Rebbe's Fabrengens. A Fabrengen Rebbe was 3 hours on average. 2 hours and 55 minutes was pure delight. 5 minutes, the Rebbe would start complaining about how Chassidim are doing nothing. That's all you remembered. The 2 hours and 55 minutes, you forgot the 5 minutes of the Rebbe telling you're doing nothing. You're accomplishing nothing. It just went into your head. It still, I can hear it in my head. No. Now, how you should do that? You weren't at those Fabrengens. I don't know how you should do that. Maybe you should watch a Fabreng and listen to the Rebbe's urgency. Listen to the Rebbe's sense of now. It can't wait till tomorrow. I don't think you can get that from anybody but the Rebbe himself. Or maybe a very big chassid. And I'm not a big chassid. To have that sense of urgency that I have to do a good thing and do it today. The Rebbe pushed. You have no idea. The Rebbe pushed Chassidim. A younger man at me gesagt, a Jew told me that he was newly married. He was married 4 years, 3 years, 5 years. Very sweet man, not a tough guy, very chassidish, a sweet guy. And he was working for the Rebbe in a certain field. I'm not going to tell you what field, it's not important. And he did something. And he got a note from the Rebbe that was scathing. It was mean. You didn't do this, that. It was so angry, so mean. He got this minor. He wasn't 50. He was 28. And the minor was so sharp. He was so hurt by it that he wrote the Rebbe a letter. And in his letter to the Rebbe, he apologizes. And he adds the words, Lama Yotza HaKetzef. Lama Yotza HaKetzef means, why is the Rebbe angry at me? Anyway, the Rebbe answered him on what he wrote. And then the Rebbe wrote, Lo Yotza Ketzef Klal Kaposhet. I'm not angry at you at all. Kaposhet. The tone was so strong that in his mind the Rebbe was angry. The Rebbe was never angry. But he was pushing. I have a colleague, he's older than I am, who worked on the Rebbe's Sforim, the Rebbe's Sichas, the Rebbe's Sforim. And he told me that if the Rebbe didn't criticize them, something was wrong. They used to get such critical answers from the Rebbe on a weekly basis. If the Rebbe stopped criticizing, the Rebbe was upset with him. The criticism wasn't an anger. It was a sense of collaboration. Like you're working together almost, like as if you're even, equals. If the Rebbe stopped criticizing, they knew the Rebbe was not happy with them. If the Rebbe was happy with them, they got these punches, wow. But it was never angry, it was just urgent. Move, 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 move. That's how the Rebbe built Lubavitch, by pushing people beyond their limits in a way you can't imagine. And we miss that. We miss that. All Lubavitch Chassidim today, beginning with myself, are all take your time, sleep, eat, relax. The Rebbe pushed us like you have no idea. In the midbar, the Eibishter himself was pushing. The cloud went up, you got to move. There's nothing to talk about. So there was terumas and machlekes. So when I ask you next week, what did the Jewish people do when you say to me, they complained and they argued, now you understand why. They complained to the Eibishter that they're moving too fast, spiritually. And they argued with one another, what is the message of this move? Did you understand? Yeah? Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Any other questions or
Rabbi,
comments?
you told me to remind you when coronavirus is over. It's not really, I guess. To remind you about what you think it's all about.
A big miracle.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not so sure it's true anymore, but I'm not ready to tell you yet.
Okay, fine.
What I was going to tell you was that it was a miracle that there's no violence in the streets. But since I told that to you, there has been violence in the streets. So, you know what it means that people are out of work for 4 months? There's people who don't have food. Pasha don't have food. I don't believe for 1 second that the uprising of the African Americans is because of this boy who was killed. They're Pasha hungry. A lot of these people have jobs that give them food for a week, and they don't have their jobs. That's how I see it, and I'm not in favor of looting and destroying property and hurting people, but I think that this is why it happened. And what I was gonna say is that one of the great miracles in America is there hasn't been rioting, and then lo and behold, there was rioting. So the greatest miracle of this whole corona is that the Eibishter spared the children. I told it to you already. Historically, whenever there's a plague, the children suffer the most. You know what would have happened to Crown Heights if it would have affected kids? In your worst nightmare, you can't think. Hashem protected the kids. It's such a mess. Every pandemic takes the young and the old, except this one. It took the best. Crown Heights lost some very important people, but the children were spared. It's a nes sha'ein kamoisa. You have no. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. Mamish. It's a messianic thing. That miracle I told you about, right? But the thing that I said I wanted to tell you later, it's no longer entirely true. Although I still believe that it could have been a lot worse. But I was going to say that the fact that there's no rioting in the streets is a big mess, and boom, there was the rioting. So, sorry, Chava. Reality ruined my fantasy. I'm sorry, it just didn't work out. It happens sometimes. Okay, does anybody else make any comments or ask any questions?
I have a question from that one.
After that.
This view of like pushing and like how we are not achieving anything or whatever, it's some kind of like a mindset of Musar or something.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. I don't know how that works. You know, the Rebbe could write you a letter. There's letters in English Kaddish. And when the Rebbe used to write letters in those days, there would be points. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, Elemento. And then P, you know. Elemento is the name of a flower. Like Dawn's-Early. Yeah, Dawn's-Early and Elemento, the name of flowers. So in point 1 or 2 or 3, the Rebbe could criticize you terribly for not doing something satisfactory. The next line, you asked about the health of so-and-so. I mentioned them by the Oyhel. I davened for them, and for sure the Eibishter is going to give them a for Shlema, and please encourage them and pass along my instructions, and so on and so forth. And you read it, and you see that there's no emotion in the Rebbe. There's no emotion. There's no emotion in the Rebbe. To you, his words are angry, but they're really not. They're just urgent. And this was the problem. When you got such letters from the Rebbe, When you got such a Rebbe, you felt that the Rebbe is tearing you to pieces. And he wasn't. He was just pushing you. So if you came back to the Rebbe and said, Rebbe, why are you so angry with me? I'm angry with you? I'm not angry. I love you. Yeah, but look at the tone of your letter. The tone is not angry. The tone is urgent. So there was a problem with the translation. You understand? But it's very difficult to get one of those answers from the Rebbe. It hurts. You get used to it after a while. Some of the people got thousands of such answers. The people who work closely with the Rebbe got such answers every day. And you get used to it. You just get used to it like everything else. Did I answer you, Natalie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, how do we motivate ourselves? Like, for me, it's like, you guys have letters, and, I mean, we can still read letters from the Rebbe, but it's like, yes, I want to bring Mashiach, but there's only so much I can do in a day. Like, I don't even know where to start. Like, even with coronavirus, it makes things, like, I mean, that's just an excuse, but I don't know. It's like I need a coach, and I mean, I know I have a mashpia, but
the mashpia is very worried about your self-esteem. And she's always telling you that you're wonderful, and she doesn't want to make you feel bad, and she doesn't want to make you overwork. You're right. You're right. I hate to say it because we don't really believe this on some level. We miss the Rebbe. This is what we miss. We have his inspiration. We even have his answers. But this kick in the pants, we miss it. You're right. There are not a lot of Lubavitchers, even Lubavitchers who are 3 times your age, who wander around this world and hear the Rebbe saying, "No, move." There are some. You're right. We all slow down. We all slow down. All of us slow down. And the inspiration to get that back, tough. Very tough. It's not easy. I'm not answering you. I'm just confirming what you're saying. And I suspect that the only way to get it is to watch the Rebbe. Don't listen to your mashpia. Go get a video of the Rebbe and listen to him scream. Now, you don't speak Yiddish, but you'll understand the tone of the screaming. You'll understand. When the Rebbe screams, how could he be 1 more minute in Golos, and it bothers him till his kishas are coming out, it's a kick in the pants. We all miss that. It's very, very hard to find a chassid who's that makusha, so connected. I want to tell you something, Shira. Only a Rebbe could criticize like that. There's an expression that goes back to the Alter Rebbe's times, that a Rebbe has a right to take away from a Jew the pleasure of Elam Hazeh. A Rebbe has a right to take away from a Jew the pleasure of this world. If you're not a Rebbe, you don't have that right. Only a Rebbe can demand so much. Another person, even a big prominent rabbi, can suggest, can encourage, but you can't criticize. What do you want? A Rebbe has an authority. A Rebbe has an authority, quote, to steal from a Jew is Gishmak in Elam Hazeh. And that's what a chassid is. A chassid is a Jew that because of his relationship with his Rebbe, get case of Lishtei, he can't enjoy his life. A lot of people learn Chassidus. A lot of people are inspired by the message of Chassidus. But a chassid is different than someone who learns Chassidus. A chassid is different than who's inspired by Chassidus. A chassid is someone who has a Rebbe. And what's a Rebbe? In part, he steals your Gishmak and Elam Hazeh. He gives you a mandate, he gives you a mission that's crazy urgent. A Rebbe is the only body who can do that because the Rebbe himself is a person of Mesiras Nefesh. A regular Gadol B'Yisrael, even a great prominent rabbi, can't come to you and say, "No, how come he didn't do it?" A Rebbe can. And we miss it. You're right, we're missing that. We're missing that. A chassid to a chassid to say, how come you're going so slowly is a tough question. There are Lubavitchers on this earth who are shluchim of the Rebbe for 50, 60, 70 years, who are seasoned Baalei Mesiras Nefesh. Every breath is Mesiras Nefesh. And they're hard to be around, you know that? If you meet one of those old-time shluchim whose life is Mesiras Nefesh, just being in the same room as them makes you feel uncomfortable. Because they're so energized, they're so intense because of their influence from the Rebbe for 50, 60, 70 years. And they make you feel uncomfortable because we like to do good things, but just relax. And the Rebbe don't like that. We're missing, I'm going to tell you straight, we are missing that. I was in Florida last summer, and if I bring you Beis Tammuz, and I had the great schus that Rabbi Harav Avram Korf, the head shliach of Florida, came and verbringed. I was supposed to verbring, and he verbringed, and I listened. And he was wonderful. It was really special to sit with him. And one of the things that he said over and over again, he's a student of Rabbi Zion Shem Tov, who was one of the great, one of the most important Lubavitchers of our generation. He set the tone for shlichus. Rabbi Ben Zion Shem Tov, Harav Ben Zion Shem Tov. And Rabbi Korf said, shlichus is not complicated. Shlichus, 24 hours. You speak Russian, yeah? Shlichus is 24 hours. You get it? It's all, that's it, just one thing. 24 hours. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, until you croak. And I remember sitting next to him, and he must have said it 10 times. Shlichus, he learned it from Rabbi Shem Tov. Shlichus, 24 hours. And I was thinking to myself, really? Oh my gosh. You get the message. You get the message.
Yeah.
He could say it. You know why he could say it? Because he lives it. Guys told me he's the head shliach in Florida. Wherever he goes, he's criticizing. He comes to a school, he criticizes. He comes to Chabad, he criticizes. Wherever he goes, he criticizes. But people say he's allowed to criticize because he practices what he preaches. He's not just telling you. But man, he makes you feel terrible. You know, whatever you do is no good. Whatever you do is no good. Why? Shlichus, 24 hours. No, eat that. He's a shliach. He has the fire. And not everybody does. It's a schus to have that fire. Okay, any more questions? Okay, so next week we're going to continue. How many more classes do we have?
I think today was the last one.
What was that?
Today was the last one, I think.
That's it? I'm disappointed. I'm depressed.
Us too.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to continue next Wednesday if the school wants to make arrangements. But either next week or next year, I'm going to continue what I'm holding. I'm right in the middle of a story. So, you know what's going to happen next year? I'm going to spend a whole 2 hours reintroducing all of these things, another 2 hours repeating everything I said, and by Chanukah, we'll get back to the story. Okay, it was nice to teach you all. A gesunten Sommer, freilichen Sommer. And Shira, if I may say so, one of the things that you got to do with a kick in the pants is get married. Some of us are afraid. Some of us want it, some of us are afraid. There's no way to get married when you're ready. You're ready to be married 10 years in if you marry a mensch. And that's one of the areas where you need a little kick in the pants. Some people do. Okay, then I'll see you, Mitzvah Hashem. Seid alle gesund.